right, looks like we still have some people getting in. Good morning, Candace and Mark and Lisa, another Lisa. All right. Hi, Janie and Sandra. Good morning. Tommy, glad you joined us again. And Jeremy, glad you made it. And I want to apologize to everyone about the confusion on the time. Totally my fault. And so thanks for being flexible with us, and thanks for reading your emails and joining us today. And welcome back for another Wednesday webinar. I will go ahead and get us kicked off. But before I do that, for those who are just joining, please feel free to drop your name in the chat and where you're from or what organization you're with. It's always fun to do a little bit of intro that way, even though with such a big group, we can't necessarily go around and individually introduce ourselves. But we're so glad you're here and you joined us. We also want to encourage you to either use the Q&A feature or the chat. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to put out there, we want this to be engaging and interactive. We'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question, we'll try to follow up with you afterwards. Occasionally, there are just too many, and we want to honor your time, of course. So without further ado, I know we are all excited to hear from Joe Mazzola with the City of McKinney. He is talking about McKinney being named one of the best places to live in DFW and how they arrived at that really incredible recognition. So, Joe, I am going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining in on this webinar to learn a little bit more about how the City of McKinney was named a top place to work in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, if that's something you're considering competing for in your city. By way of background, for those that may not know, the City of McKinney, our population is 215,000. We are a community that's about 25 minutes north of Dallas. We are part of Collin County, one of the fastest growing counties in America the last 2 or 3 years. Collin County is one of 10 counties that form the greater DFW region, which includes a little over 7 million people. So a thriving, growing, fairly large region that we live in here. I'm going to go to share screen here right now, and I'll walk you through the criteria that was used for the City of McKinney being named a top workplace. We good to go? Can you see that screen? Is everything okay there, Krista?
Yes, sir. Looks wonderful.
Good. Okay. With that, the criteria that's used to select a city as a top place to work is based on a survey. The survey is done by a company called Energage. They're based in Pennsylvania. They've been doing culture and employee engagement surveys for some 15 years, and you can see on the slide their outreach. The survey instrument itself is pretty straightforward. It includes 24 basic questions, and they use a Likert scale that goes everywhere from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So it's pretty straightforward. To compete for recognition, you have to have a response rate of at least 35% of your employees. All of the responses are kept confidential. So the only thing we as the city management sees is basically aggregate data. Now, Energage, this company, partners with different media outlets across the country and do this in tandem with, say, the Boston Globe or the Chicago Tribune or the Washington Post. In our case, the Dallas Morning News, the newspaper for the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There are 3 categories of the organizations that compete for this type of recognition. The large company category is for those with 500 employees or more. The medium-sized company category is 150 to 499 employees. And the small companies are fewer than 149 employees. In our city, we have 1,400 employees in the usual departments that you have in your cities, in addition to an airport. So we competed in the large category. The companies that were chosen for this recognition include places like Charles Schwab, Brinker International, Capital One Financial, Omni Hotels and Resorts. And by the way, the City of McKinney was the only municipality chosen for this honor, which is kind of a cool thing. So I'm going to share with you the slide deck that a company representative used to share our survey results with our executive leadership team. Okay, this is just how the presentation's broken down, no problem. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because I think the value is going to be in your questions at the end. They start by presenting a word cloud that's based on the kind of words and terms and expressions that are made by our employees. And this is the City of McKinney word cloud. The words in green are typically used by employees that are more engaged. The words in red are typically used by employees who are not so much engaged. And the ones highlighted in the sort of the baby blue there are the City of McKinney's core values: respect, integrity, service, and excellence. This is how this company called Energage defines engagement. If our employees are motivated, if they are committed to staying in the family, and if they're willing to recruit others to join the organization. A little bit different than how Gallup or other organizations define engagement. On the left side of the screen here, you can see the overall workplace score for the City of McKinney, and then below it, you see that number 3. That means that it went up 3 percentage points from the last time we took the survey 2 years earlier. We received notification as being a top place on November 5th of 2023. We took the survey in 2021 and missed it kind of by a whisker, so we thought we'd take another stab at it in 2023. The 13 you see underneath the horseshoe there indicates that the City of McKinney was 13 percentage points higher than a benchmark that included 31 other cities that are about the same size as McKinney.
Joe, I hate to
Yes.
interrupt you. I'm so sorry. The screen we see, the slides are not changing.
Oh, okay. Well, let me kind of go over here and try this then for you.
There we go.
Better?
Yeah,
works.
thank you.
Yes, thank
Sorry
you
about
so
that.
much.
Okay, yeah. My bad there on the split screen. So does this all make sense now when you see the horseshoe with the 77, the 3, and the 13?
Yes, sir.
Overall engagement here, 3 points up from 2 years earlier, McKinney to McKinney, 13 percentage points higher than a benchmark of 31 other cities. On the right-hand side of the screen are the different themes that are in the survey itself. They center on things like, do the employees feel that they're empowered? Do the employees feel like they're given opportunities to grow professionally, et cetera? Okay, next up is a scattergram that compares the City of McKinney to the 31 other benchmark cities. And by the way, the benchmark cities are all of the cities across the country that competed for this recognition in the year 2022. Because there were not many other cities that competed for it in 2023, they compared us to this benchmark of the 31 other cities that competed last year, which includes a few other cities that were chosen for the recognition. So that's the benchmark. Okay, next they provide some data about the biggest movers. On the left side, you can see where we've had more increase. On the right side, you can see where we've had some decreases. Keep in mind on the decreases that the margin of error for something like this is typically about 1.5 percentage points. So this is fairly consistent with the previous survey results. Okay. Now this shows the same thing compared to the benchmark of those 31 other cities. And all of these are green, not red, because they're all positive as opposed to some declines over here. So you can see we had pretty strong double-digit increases relative to the benchmark. And even on the bottom end of that scale, we had some fairly positive increases. Now, this is an overall report card of the 6 themes that I mentioned: the engagement and able to grow, alignment, that I feel valued, that I feel empowered to execute, etc. The dark or the navy blue bar graph is the City of McKinney. Underneath it in the gray color is the benchmark of the 31 other cities. The little number in the box to the right of the blue bar indicates 15% in this case over the benchmark, no problem. And the column trend over here shows movement McKinney to McKinney 2021 compared to 2023. Okay. Now I'll go through the individual slides rather quickly. The first one deals with alignment, whether or not the employees agree that the city seems to be moving in the right direction and that they can be part of something bigger than themselves, etc. You can see the scores over here. Do I feel that I'm empowered to execute? There are 5 different questions that form the bucket that leads to this one. You can see the trend here, fairly positive. The lowest one on this particular chart, and even though it's higher than the benchmark of the other cities, something we all probably struggle with, was meetings in the city of McKinney make a good use of my time. I'm only sharing this because how is it that you act on the data that you get? And in this case, we knew that this was low, so we turned it over to our Leadership Academy class and asked them to drill down deeper into it and then offer a series of recommendations of what we might be able to do in the city of McKinney across the entire organization to make meetings more meaningful. So the good news is that we're doing better than other cities. The bad news is that 4 out of 10 employees are frustrated that meetings are not so positive and good use of their time. The point is we're going to act on that and try to make an improvement. This is a biggie in today's world when it comes to motivation in the 21st century workplace. Employees want an opportunity to grow and stretch and develop personally and professionally. So this is a biggie, and I'm proud to say that the City of McKinney has invested a lot of time, energy, and thought into opportunities for professional growth over the last several years, and that seems to be reflective in the data here. Okay, this is the overall engagement score for the City of McKinney, and just by way of comparison, Gallup has been tracking employee engagement in all domains, not just government, for a lot of years. Gallup did a 6-year longitudinal study on state and local government and included all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The Gallup data says that in state and local government, the engagement rate for employees is 29%. All of the rest of society is 34%. So we're lagging a little bit behind the rest of society. So when you see engagement scores that are 70, 80%, that's pretty good and leads you to believe that you're hitting on a lot of the good cylinders when it comes to employee engagement. Okay, do I feel valued at work? And here's how they look at the data and the types of questions that they ask for this particular item. Do I feel respected at work? And again, you can see the pattern of doing fairly well in all of these individual areas. This is a special question that they broke out, and it deals specifically with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you can see that we're fairly close to all of you out there, other cities across the country, that we're paying attention to that as we should. Now, real quickly, I want to show you how they can also break down the demographics to kind of slice and dice this data a little bit better if you're interested in that. One way they can do that is by tenure, less than 6 months down here. They're pretty fired up and energized about being part of the city. And then that seems to change depending on tenure all the way up to 15 or more years in the city. Next, they can break it down by job grade in 3 general buckets: department heads, supervisors and managers, and then frontline staff. Okay. Then they can break it down by salary bands, $100,000 or more, all the way down to less than 30,000. Like all of you, I'm sure we have very, very few employees that make less than $30,000 a year. Entry-level custodians, and that's pretty much it. And then after they get out of step 1, they bump into a salary range that's above that. So although it's a disheartening to see that that's low, we're really talking about a very, very small number of employees that fall in that category. So I went through this pretty darn quickly, but these are the areas that I covered, and I did it intentionally so that we would have time for your specific questions. Before I do that and close the screen and go to the gallery to answer your questions, however, I want to tell you that if you make the cut and you're chosen as a top place to work for your region, you automatically qualify to be considered for a top place to work nationally. And although we weren't told to embargo the information, last Thursday, I think it was, I got a call from a woman in New York and said, USA Today is going to announce the top places to work in America on March 20th, and the city of McKinney made the cut as a top place to work in a nation. And that, of course, can help leverage and help optimize recruiting and retention and other things across the organization. So with that, I am going to stop the share screen and roll it over to take your questions. Thank you for your attention. I went through that pretty quickly.
See?
Okay,
Does
Chris?
anybody have any questions? Most of it was related to the slides at the beginning. So does anyone have any additional questions for Joe? I will ask in the meantime while we're waiting to see. Joe, what for a city who might be interested in this, like what would you say, or who would you recommend try to achieve this? Like where should a city be in this process, I guess, to be able to get this recognition?
Well, I would have to say you have to be on top of your game to compete for it, because it's a pretty tough cut. And I'm not trying to be boastful or anything else, but with our city manager, Paul Grimes, we've been on a journey now that's creeping up on 7 years, focusing on culture and engagement and customer service and opportunities for professional growth and leadership development. We've put a lot of thought and time and energy and resources into turning the ship around and changing the culture. And I think everybody intuitively kind of knows where you are. But when you compete against companies like Charles Schwab and Brinker International and Capital One Finance, you've got to be pretty strong in all those areas that I shared. So the other thing I will tell you is that many of you are probably doing engagement surveys through different companies. This is just one company that offers this service. We don't use this company for our engagement surveys, for example. We use a Canadian-based company called Talent Map. So we knew where we were based on our other engagement surveys and how we were moving the needle. So if you fall in that category and you know where you stand, and if you think you can be competitive, why not take a stab at it? Now, they're in it for the money. I'll tell you that. They tried to sell you for this company called Intergage to become your engagement survey resource. And there's a fee that goes along with that. And then the media outlets, in our case, the Dallas Morning News, makes money on this because they present publications like this and sell advertisement in it, touting all these great places to work in a Dallas-Fort Worth region. So there's some money in it. Although having said that, you do not have to pay to play. You can take the survey and say, no, we're not interested in any of the kind of report that I shared with you, and you see where you come. The problem is if you come up short, you don't know where the challenges were, where the shortfalls were, et cetera. So they build into the system some way to entice you to hire them to do your engagement surveys for your city.
That makes sense. Amy said, I love the way you phrased this, Amy. I'm sorry if I missed this, but was this a Gallup survey? And you might have just covered that.
What is the Gallup survey?
No, was this a Gallup survey?
No, it was not a Gallup survey. This survey was done by the company called Intergage, and they're based in Pennsylvania.
And she just to give her some credit on that, she asked that question right before you addressed that. So,
okay, gotcha.
My timing was off, not hers. But thanks, Amy, for that. Okay, and then Drew asked, what steps does an organization need to follow to create a great workplace? And I love that question because if you don't mind, Joe, I sent everyone a copy of the dissertation that you provided to us along with the argument. And so I think maybe those two kind of go hand in hand, with this answer. So I wanted to let you know I did send that out yesterday. So for those of you who registered either pretty late last night or early this morning, or just this morning, I'll send that to you separately is really what I was going to say. So you'll have a copy of that as well. But do you mind talking about that a little bit, Joe?
Yeah, I did my doctoral dissertation on transformation of local government, specifically focused on culture and employee engagement, because I think there's a gap out there that sort of provides a detailed roadmap of different intervention strategies you can take to move the needle in all these areas. And I go chapter and verse in great detail of that dissertation, and I wrote it to help other cities that might be looking for a roadmap to follow when it comes to culture engagement and bringing out the best in employees. So I would refer you to take a look at chapter 5. You don't need to read all 200 and whatever pages. But if you go to chapter 5, I am very explicit in trying to create a roadmap or a GPS system that any city could look at and go, oh, I never thought of that when it comes to this, that, or the other thing. So take a look at chapter 5 of the dissertation, and I hope it might be helpful for you. And when we
Excellent.
talked yesterday about this, the question is, wow, the data points that I shared, were, again, not trying to be boastful, but it's pretty impressive. The more important question is, well, how did you get there? And that's where the dissertation might be able to answer some questions and maybe offer you some tips to consider in your city.
Absolutely. I love that practical application component because just like we talked about previously, I think most people can recognize that all of these factors are important. we know how important it is and how valuable it is. It's how to get there that we struggle, maybe, or that we find challenging sometimes.
Exactly.
And Janie asked, to compete, do we start with Intergage or the USA Today top workplaces? Do they work together? We've been contacted by top workplaces, but never participated. Thank you.
No, you would have to go back to Intergage or the company that sent out the notice to ask if you wanted to participate. You don't start with the USA Today. That's the national level. You start in your area. And then if you make that cut, you're eligible to compete for that national level recognition that comes 3 or 4 or 5 months later downstream. And that's automatic. If you make that cut, they'll inform you. So start locally with Intergage or the whoever sent out the link for you to consider it at your city.
Right. I have a question for you, Joe, and
Mhm.
I'm surprised we haven't received it yet. So I might be jumping the gun. Somebody might be about to type this in, but how important is it to have the support of the city manager, city manager's office, and then the elected officials in your organization to make this happen? And if you don't have that level of support, or commitment dedicated to this, how do you go about obtaining that?
Yeah, that's a biggie. That's huge. We're blessed with a very forward-thinking city manager, Paul Grimes. He's been in the city now for about 7 years. Had the same position in Orland Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, before he came to us. Professional city manager, visionary, former Navy officer who understands how to get things done and what's important. And the thing I admire about our city manager is he understands the importance of intentionality. If you want to shape a winning culture, you cannot do it by dumb luck or happenstance. It takes intentionality. And he had the vision to focus on culture and to establish a Department of Organizational Development. And he made a case of why that was important to the elected officials who provided the resources and the funding to make that happen. Additionally, you need the city manager to provide the top cover emphasis and the tenacity to move forward. Cultural change takes time. It's like watching grass grow. You can't see it, but it's very slowly happening. And a lot of times we have high energy, type A personality types that like to see results very quickly. It doesn't happen when you're trying to turn the ship around and change culture. So you have to have bulldog tenacity to stick with it. And we've been blessed with a city manager who understands the importance, who understands the intentionality, and who understands that you need to be tenacious and stick with it to drive the change. If you've read anything from Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, he talks about this flywheel concept. And when you begin to turn the flywheel, it is arduous and hard and difficult. And then as it begins to pick up steam, and all of a sudden this flywheel begins to run on its own. And we've reached the point now where our employees move the needle forward for us. It's no longer city management or department heads. And that's just a flywheel concept, but it takes time to get there. And it takes city management support and leadership to make that happen. Good point.
It reminds me of Ron's closing session from the Servant Leadership Conference. If you haven't checked that out, I'll do a shameless little plug, especially since it's free to view, but it's on the SGR YouTube channel, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. But I love that concept. Okay, a few more. Do you get reporting from the Intergage survey that you are able to share with your employees?
Recordings, was that the
reporting? I'm sorry, reporting.
They tried to sell us on this, and I said, hey, look, we have a contract with a company in Canada. We don't want to get into apples and oranges. We're very happy with them. They do a really good job with employee engagement. If anybody wants information on this company called Talent Map, I'll be able to provide it. And I can even provide you a copy of the report of how they present engagement data. They look at 15 dimensions of employee engagement, which we like. So they said, hey, Joe, for $12,000, we can do this. I said, no. And then they came back and said, for $10,000, we can do this. I said, no. And then they came back and said, well, Joe, for about $8,000, we can do this. And finally, I said, if you'll give us a peek under the tent of kind of what you guys deliver for about $2,000, we'll do it. If not, we're not going to play. They said, okay. So this is the data that they presented to us, but we are not going to use them for the engagement survey. And this is the kind of data that we can in turn share with our employees, and we're pretty good about that. So what you see is what we can share with our employees and our department heads.
Excellent. Let's see, Lisa says, I work for a small community, 135 employees with 7,500 residents. We are working now on the Sterling Award. Longboat Key is a very elite community, and we would love to be the top place to work in the west coast of Florida. I'm interested, Lisa. That sounds amazing.
Well, I would encourage you to pursue that. Any kind of recognition like that helps with recruiting and retention and employee pride, etc. So, and we are very good that we don't put our thumb on the scale in any form or fashion when it comes to these surveys. We just say, be honest, be forthright. It's confidential. Tell us what we're doing right and tell us where the gaps are, and we'll try to address those concerns, etc. So anything that you can do to help move things in that direction, I would encourage you to consider.
Excellent. I probably should have just said I'm interested. I mean, I'm interested in living there, to be clear. Okay. How do you engage your people in the strategic planning process?
We follow the HPO, the High Performance Organization methodology in the City of McKinney. We started sending people out to the University of Virginia to go through the SEI, or the lead course out there. That's sort of the playbook for HPO. That shifted to the College of Charleston, and we've sent some folks out there as well. And then we brought in the instructors from the HPO course in Virginia or Charleston to do 3-day deeper dive workshops on the HPO methodology in the City of McKinney. And that wasn't enough. So then we developed our own internal HPO 101 course that we took to all of our departments and trained over 1,100 employees on what it is and what it isn't, and their role in it, and what it means to them at their level in the organization, and how the city is adopting it to get everybody kind of focused and using the same language and rowing in the same direction, etc. But specifically, we have an executive leadership team that meets every other week like clockwork. We have a meeting on Monday, actually, that focuses strictly on the work of strategic leadership for the city. Culture is a strategic leadership issue like this. And then we have in each of our departments, department level leadership teams, where they too are charged to think of what is the strategic work that we need to do in our department to move things forward. So it is not a staff meeting by another name, but it is really focused on the work of strategic leadership at the department level. So those are some things that we do to focus on these higher level things across the city and to get our employees involved. We also have a leadership academy for our employees, and we assign them capstone projects at the end of their 9-month-long program and charge them to help make the organization better. So we think it's more important to have a practicum on leadership as opposed to theoretical academic approach to leadership in their academy experience. So those are some examples of the things that we do to sort of breathe life into these things that can create a winning culture.
Excellent. Tommy said, thank you for the presentation, Joe. In your dissertation, in the guiding principles heading, you mentioned, one of the 3 principles as creating a winning organizational culture grounded in trust.
Yes.
Can you share your experience or experiences with introducing this specific principle amongst employees of different generations?
Yeah, that's interesting. For the first time in American history, we have 5 generations in the workplace, which is startling. Now the older generation is beginning to attrit out, etc. So it's interesting, and at each generation sort of brings some things that come along with it. So it's a little bit different to inspire, to motivate, to create a sense of trust in different generations and different age groups, etc. By the way, the 3 guiding principles in the dissertation came from our city manager. When he first came to the city, he went around to introduce himself to everybody across the city and all the departments, no problem. I think most new senior leaders do that same thing. But he said after he introduced himself, talked about his background, he described his 3 core principles: build and maintain trust in the community, create a winning organizational culture, and his 3rd core principle was kind of operational excellence, of setting the gold standard of technical competence in everything that we do, so that if somebody wanted to see how a Parks and Recreation department in municipal government should be run, they ought to go to McKinney, and that should be the gold standard of how you get things done right, etc. So those 3 guiding principles came from the city manager, and then we built around it. And we built around the high performance organization framework with all of the other things that are laced in that chapter 5 of the dissertation, to including how we go about building trust. One of the things I will tell you relative to the survey, for example, is you need to let the employees know that you listened, that you took it to heart, and what you were going to do to act on it. If they felt it was a bunch of eyewash and fell on deaf ears, you've lost them. And we've been very diligent in the city of McKinney when we ask our employees for advice or suggestions or input. We are very good about following up on that, acting on it. In some cases, you have to say no. That's no problem, but you give the rhyme and reason behind that. So I would say one of the key things that helps to foster trust, regardless of what generation the employee is in, is giving an authentic voice, but then listening and acting on the input that you receive. And if the answer happens to be no, we can't do that, oh, by the way, here's the reason why behind it.
Love that. Great advice. Okay, we have another one. I love this question too. Joe, you mentioned the Leadership Academy worked to come up with suggestions to improve meetings. What suggestions did they have?
They just provided a report to the executive team just a matter of about 2 weeks ago, and we're going to discuss that at Monday's meeting, incidentally. But they said you need to make sure that you have a crystal clear purpose. You need to know that you have an agenda on it. You need to send the agenda out as a read ahead. You need to make sure you're inviting the right people to the meeting. You need a meeting facilitator that can keep people focused on staff, create psychological safety where people feel free to contribute, offer ideas. You need to sort of stay focused on what are the takeaways. You need to focus on the deliverables and have clarity on that. You need to be paying attention to the timelines, etc. We'll take that on the City of McKinney, and we'll take all that advice, and we'll draw on research, etc. to build out. I suspect that one of the things we're going to decide Monday is to build out a class or a workshop on how to run a meeting. There are LinkedIn classes that already do that sort of thing. Harvard Business Review has some very excellent resources and research that's based on that. So we'll take that on for action. That's just an example of how we, again, listen, take their advice, and then do something with it.
Excellent. Well, and because I can't resist myself, of course, but SGR also has some resources and trainings on how to hold successful meetings. So if that's something you're interested in, we're happy to help.
Yeah, very good.
Christina also asked, does your agency operating process inform your employee evaluations? And if so, how?
Repeat the very start of that, Chris.
Does your agency operating process inform your employee evaluations?
Yes, we changed our employee evaluations and we drew on a lot of employee input when we did that. And then we had a lot of focus group meetings. And then we red teamed it to look at sort of the potential unintended consequences, etc. So what we did is we re-wickered our evaluation to include a focus on core values. Do you embody, embrace, and support and hold yourself and others accountable when it comes to respect, integrity, service, and excellence? We focus on goals. What is it that you want to achieve over this next year? Will you sit with your supervisor and you focus and pay attention to goals? We have a section on our evaluation that focuses on your professional growth. In the City of McKinney last year, we offered our employees through just our internal McKinney University, what we do, 102 different classes, workshops, seminars. Over 50% of them dealt with leadership and management, etc., and opportunities to grow. And our expectation is the City of McKinney will do its part to provide you opportunities to grow. The expectation is that you do your part and take advantage of those opportunities. If so, we're onto something pretty cool here. And oh, by the way, when it comes time for internal promotions, we're going to break the tie and people will take advantage of those opportunities, etc. So yeah, the organization changed our evaluation system to reinforce key aspects of our culture, be it professional growth or goal setting, mutual goal setting, or core values, etc. We don't want our employees in the City of McKinney to have a one-year career and repeat it 25 times and never grow. We want them to be different at the end of the pipeline. We want them to continue to grow, to learn, to stretch, etc. And by the way, there's a hunger for that. If you looked at the research, employees thrive on opportunities to grow and develop and advance. So when you provide those opportunities, you are delivering what the employees want, and it helps bring out the best of them. That leads to some of the data points that you saw on some of the survey data we presented.
Excellent. And Christina also asked, will you call out what you find is the most significant and unique parts of your employee engagement or your people process as a whole? For example, leadership, management, employee engagement, and employee development process.
I would say that if I had to single out two things, I would focus values, values, values. Now, there are a lot of organizations that have core values. There are two ways you go about establishing values. One is where the executive team does a 2-day offsite, they lock the door, they come up with very good values. They go back to the organization, they call a major pep rally, they announce and reveal the core values, they put the posters in the break room, and then everybody goes back to work. Our city manager took the time to include the employees in establishing the values. We had 47 small group meetings. The city manager and I tag teamed on that. Busy guy, city manager, right? 47 small group meetings in the departments on their turf. What do you think should be the values that guide how we treat one another and the citizens that we serve in our community, etc.? So values, 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 that drives culture. By the way, we don't talk about it much, but values are also a means of accountability. If respect is one of your values, it's much easier to hold an employee accountable to say, you know, I heard how you talked to that citizen on the phone a few minutes ago when she was frustrated with the permit process. How does that square with our core value of respect or service? Let's talk about that. So you can use your values, number one, to inspire people and set a standard, an expectation, but you can also use the values as a means of accountability. And the research shows that 80% of managers are conflict avoidant. They don't want to deal with the headaches. If you can go in the back door of the values to address those concerns for accountability, you're onto something. So it's not as though you're attacking your person. The other thing I would mention as strong is leadership development. Through your leadership development program, if you do it right, that is the vehicle that can help bring a lot of these things to life across the entire organization that you saw in the survey data. So if I could mention two things, it would be values and leadership development. Good
Excellent.
question.
Excellent question. These are all great questions.
They sure are, yeah.
Okay, and then Trey said, any particular departments embrace or resist the process at the beginning? Any one particular area of the city that benefited the most? How did public safety employees respond? And did it improve retention of these employees?
No, boy, there's a lot in that question.
That's a good, yeah, good question.
Yeah. All right, Trey, I'll take a stab at it for you. Number one, there's an automatic reaction when the new city manager comes in and they think, here we go again. It's a new flavor of the month. It's a new bumper sticker initiative. I'll just wait this guy out like I did the last 3 or 4 before him. So you going into it, know that you're going to get some resistance to change. I don't know that it is unique to any given department that digs in more than others. I will tell you that most departments say, oh, we're already doing this anyway. We're kind of unique. Well, okay. When you peel back the onion, you find not so much. So you get a lot of departments that think we're already doing this. We're not using the lingo or the language. Not so true. Police and fire, public safety in general, yes, they say we got this. Yeah, we're different. We are hierarchical. We are a chain of command, etc. That doesn't really wash if you really drill down deeper into it. If you looked at Team of Teams, which was written by Stanley McBristol, for example, his whole approach to fighting wars in today's world required more empowerment of frontline soldiers being able to exercise judgment, to be nimble in the so-called VUCA world. Another point that Ron Holyfield talks about a lot. So yeah, we get some pushback, and you get some people that just go, I'm not buying it. I'm not on board with the change. And eventually they attrit out of the organization and they move on. And then you get other employees that see the results of what's taken place, and then they go, oh, I get it now. The kicker is there's a lag time, Trey, of how long it takes before the employees begin to see the fruits of the labor. When you begin to see that payoff, we're back to that flywheel where it picks up some energy and more people get on board. And that's where we are in the city of McKinney now, although it's taken us a number of years to get here.
Okay, we have 1 more minute. But I think this question is very important that we get to. And maybe something that all of us have been wondering, because Janie said or asked, can you please tell us about that logo behind Mr. Mazzola? Is that the city's logo?
Yeah, we did a lot of branding with our values and etc. RISE is our respect, integrity, service, excellence. We have a challenge coin. We have decals on all of our vehicle fleet across the city, include police and fire vehicles. In our council chambers, when there are council meetings, we have our values that are posted up there, etc. Everything in our value statement, to include examples of what service looks like in action, came from those 47 small group meetings with the employees themselves that said this is kind of what respect really means when you operationalize it or put it into practice. So yeah, that's all part of our branding. I will tell you that the top places to work, they present a plaque, and it looks like this guy here. That's the plaque that they present. And I mentioned some of the branding that we did through our communications and marketing for recruiting on our HR website, et cetera. We do some of this, et cetera. So that all comes from our communications and marketing as part of our branding and our values and our culture.
Excellent. Well, Joe, I can't thank you enough for joining us today and presenting this and educating us. I also want to encourage everyone, I'm putting the link in the chat right now for next week's Wednesday webinar, where we're going to be hearing from Aisha Moses on our team, the SGR webmaster, and she's going to talk a little bit about website marketing trends. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting session and very informative as well. But again, Joe, your time is valuable and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you to everyone who attended this week at SGR's Wednesday webinar, and I hope to see you all again next Wednesday.
Thanks, everyone. Wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Mhm.